So I said that to explain the connections between letter making and symbol making that continued throughout Middle Asia, I would have two sections. So we had the first on weaving. This fifth appendix is on figure and ground. Now, and by figure and ground, I mean that if you look at the surface, then you see one thing, and if you look at the underlying thing, you get another pattern. To make this completely clear, let's go back to those funny symbols that we have for weaving. And say this one. Well, here you have a pattern. Now we're dealing with jewelry. If I look at the light silvery part, then I have the Trishula type approach linked with a square. But if I look at the thing in between, I have this pattern. And interestingly enough, if I turn it 45 degrees, I haven't changed anything, but it looks really quite different. And now I take you here to other examples of that. And of particular interest is this one, because if you focus on the central part, you realize that this is generating a swastika again. And here you have a 3E that's going into a 5E and so forth. Well, we can do this in various ways. So I can take a kind of double backwards S, do it that. Even the distance between the same symbol. So I have 4 L's in different configurations, but I change the distance between them, and I have a very different effect. Or I have this one, I color it black, I have a different effect. I do white ones and black ones, or dark ones together, and I have a different effect. And here, variations. So, and of course I can take a cross in a circle and a cross in a square. I can take a horizontal this way, and I get different elements, or I get different letters, or different substances, and so on. Well, that also applies to more complicated things. So the backward swastika, but now in a decorative form, and then I can put that into a pattern, or so, and then I can take isolated aspects and generate letters. Or I can do a series of swastikas backwards or forwards. Or I can take this pattern, do it backwards, and so on. I can isolate half of it and get this. I can take this shape and do it through the different directions. And then if I do it this way, I get a G. And here, this B, which is opened up in this version, or G now in these versions, or B and H here. So just by changing the orientation, I get different letters. And then if we go back to the shape, the backward swastika, there it is, as a posilon. If I have one of those, it's an R in ancient Russian. Or now I can take this pattern and put it onto a mosque, and I have 4. Well, I have a whole series of them. And then it really depends on what I'm looking at. So I look at this quickly and I say, oh, a black square, I thought. I look more closely and I see that there's a swastika in it. I look at this and I say, oh, a menander pattern. I look a little more closely and I say, oh, that's a backward L and an upside down L. Yes, each case. But now I look at the dark ones and I see that these are backward S's. I look at this one, and now I see an L of a story, pardon my French, and an upside down L of a story. But now I look at the dark and I have S's. So SL. And here I have intersecting L's. Or if I turn my head, I have backward S's again. And if I look at this from the side, I again have S's. So it's this is what I mean by figure and ground. If I look at the one, I see one thing. I look at the other, I look at another thing. Now, this is used in all the cultures. Here are some examples of what looks like a T in different versions. And then swastikas in between. But it's in the Arabic culture and the Russian culture that this really takes off. So I have this figure, a T. This is a symbol of the god Rod. Now, here I am in a complex, so I immediately notice all of this, but if I look at the pattern, it's that pattern again, which I see there in a simplified form. And so it's a question, am I distracted by this and try to read this, or do I see the big picture? And again, here we have these squigglies, here we have this, and I can create then a whole pattern of those. Or here, a backward S, which is an S this way. Here, depending on which way I look at it, S's. Or I can start with this and then add bits and end up again with the complicated backward swastika. Or I can go to Draco, which is that snake-like thing, and have these variants. I can create then this, or now I can make one curly and the other simple. And then if I look at bits of it, I have an S again from the side. Or here with intersecting C's or S's if I'm thinking in Russian. Or here is a shape called Rodovik. Well, here you see it as a set of patterns with Facebook signs around it. Here we are in the Villa of the Mysteries, and we have the same symbol. Here you see it again. Here you see it on the wall of the Villa of the Mysteries. So we're in Rome, south of Rome, near Pompeii. Here you have a backward swastika, but now in a church in Israel. Here you have your Rodovik symbol, which, if you look closely, is just 4 S's. Yes? Now I have the Rodovik symbol on an Etruscan vase, and here I have the Rodovik figure on a medieval French manuscript. And here you see it as part of the Erzbischöfliches Ordinariat, or the Archbishop's palace or building in Freiburg. And here, if you look closely, there's the detail, and there you see it surrounding a painting in the Reichenau, now on an island in the north of Switzerland from the 9th century. So what we thought of as a Russian pattern is now turning up in French manuscripts, Etruscan vases on priestly decorations and even decorations of churches. And if we look at bits of them, it's just an S, but if we look at the whole thing, it's much more. So these patterns which we see in Europe, we see again here in Northern Europe, where we are looking at the Ugunskrust, and we have an E that turns into an M and a backwards E, and almost like a W. But if we go to the mausoleum of Sufi Yasawi, we're now in Middle Asia, well, at first look, I see here, if I'm a good Muslim, Allahu, repeated, so Allah. And then it's a question of where I look, because if I look as a Westerner, I see an L repeated 4 times. And here you see another version of it, yes. But if you, that's if I look at the L's as figures. But if I look at the ground, what do I see? I see a swastika. So the L is the figure, and the swastika is the ground. And here you have 6s that turn into 9s, and the ground is now a cross. Now, this may just seem to be a complete coincidence, but it's not. So here I have a more complicated case where I have 6s and 9s, and here I have Allahu repeated, and again now it's creating a cross. Or here 2 L's intersecting, but the pattern around them is again that version of the backwards swastika called the Pozzolon. And so I can look at this, and I can see this as an F and an upside down F, or this as 2 E's, or here, if I look at the dark part, then I see a backward E, a sloping E, another sloping E, and another sloping E, yes? But if I look at the white parts, I have 4 F's. So E and F are not just two letters in sequence, the E creates the F, if I think in terms of figure and ground. And if I look at this figure, if I look in terms of ground, I have if written 4 times. But if I look at the dark part, I have Allahu written 4 times, or Allah 4 times. And as I pointed out in lecture 12 of the main part of the body, of the, or the main book, this is also the exact pattern for that thing that becomes a symbol of the Romans, of the Christians, of the Latvians, and of the Muslims. Here is a Christian variant of the same, but now Allah has turned into 4 swastikas. Or here we have a Russian symbol, where again we have 4 F's, but in a completely different context. Or now I've taken Allah, Allahu, and just isolated 2 little bits, and I have a 69. Here I have 4 backwards F's, or 4 I's, but if I see the whole thing, then obviously I see something very different again. Or here I go back to that sacred symbol, and if I add just those little light bits, what do I have? I have the sleeve of one of my Russian boys. Or here, and which linking back to the Ugunskrust again. So we're going from Persia to Russia to Latvia just by switching the figure ground. So here are 2 letters, Yod and He, in Paleo-Hebrew. Here are 3 letters in early Hebrew. This is Fa. These again are 2 Hebrew letters in various forms. Now, and now I switch them and so on. And I'm in the Sherdot Madrasa in Samarkand. And here I have a triple F kind of thing. And all of this is taking place up here. So letters, symbols, back and forth. Here are 2 letters of Brahmi. I switch them like this and I get high, well, HY. Again, symbols of letters this way. Now I'm into decorations. Now I'm into decorations. Here I'm into decorations, but the center is a swastika. Here I have the word Allah, Allahu, and Muhammad. Muhammad repeated 4 times, but the connection between them is 4 swastikas again. And to go even further, we have a backward version of that Rodovnik figure, and then a forward version, a backward swastika and a forward swastika. Here we're 20,000 BC. Sorry, we're 2000 BC in the Greek context. Here we're in the Palais de la Justice, or the Palace of Justice in Brussels. Here we're in Tokyo Temple, or sorry, in a Japanese temple. It takes a second for it to, you have to look closely, but there's a backward swastika and a forward swastika there. And here you have a backward swastika and a forward swastika on the floor of a church 5 miles from where I am. Well, I'm in Maastricht, or I live in Maastricht, and that's the town of Meersen. And here we're back in the palace of Shabdi Zinda, which means live the king, in Samarkand, and we have forward and backward swastikas again here. And then Allah things in between. So it's this constant attention to what is the figure in the ground that generates not just nice figures, but generates figures that become both symbols and letters at the same time. Here you have a Proto-Bulgarian alphabet, a Proto-Russian alphabet, and one of the letters is Alax. Now this is particularly interesting because here you have the whole symbol going in 4 directions, yes? But we have A, then LL, produced as 2 of those upward male figures, then an A, and then the female version. Here is another variant, and here is yet another variant, and it comes back in this thing. So here is the Bibi Kanim mosque. There is a wall. If I get close to the wall, it's filled with those upward male figures that we know also is the Othel rune, or the Othela rune in the runic tradition. Or I can take the upward and the downward and the upward of this and end up with this kind of figure. Here is a passage from the mystics, the unity in the Trinity, masculine, feminine, and neuter, done as 3 dots. The upward figure, the great breath of God, creative soul, and essence, in the created being, so breath and essence, and he formed. Wa ibara alahim athahadam, Moses chapter 1, verses 27 to 20. The Brahmins say al-lahim, the powerful among them, and mystically say his 2 principles, which before creation were united into a single abode, thohu vabohu, Allah great, Allahi habitation, Allahim the great abode of the circle, the all, the whole, of the Veda, Aham, the Aum, which is then that symbol again with a dot on top of it. A masculine principle, first chief, scepter, staff, unity, seed, power, there, breath, soul, existence, secret, marvel, terror, dot, circle, serpent, continuation, measure, time, respiration, expiration, thought, spirit, death, etc. So the symbols of the breath, the male, the female, the breathing, the measuring, the cosmos, all of that in 3 little symbols that become then the starting point for a whole, well, in this case, a whole religion. I'm going to give you a couple of more examples. This is not a complete systematic study of the subject. It's an anecdotal way of taking a few tiny examples and showing that this is another 26 lectures for each of these points. So this is the symbol that we're familiar with at the end of chapter 12. It's a symbol of life. And it's really the ram's horns. And if I take one of those ram's horns, it gives me this, which is the letter Y with value 400. Or it's the symbol for epsilon. So here we are in Ethiopian, here we're in Coptic. Now, I take that funny little symbol and I turn it sideways and make it into the ground and repeat it 4 times, and I have the Byzantine flag. I make it light and do it 4 times, and I have the Balkan flag. And then I can go into or I can just do one of them and I again have another version of the Balkan flag. Here are then all different kinds of versions of the same thing, but I have then a whole series of flags just by taking one little set of horns and turning them. And on the one hand, I'm dealing with the symbol of life. On the other hand, I'm dealing with 2 letters. And on the other hand, I'm dealing with a dozen flags. Or I can take a famous concept of St. Peter with his keys. I can draw the key. I can draw the keys of the Vatican, one dark and one light. I can draw a key with a Trinity here and an E here, or do various versions. I can do different kinds of crosses and create then everything to the arms of Bremen, the Kilim cross, and Latvian cufflinks. Or I can take the cross and now put on the cross 2 sets of keys. I can take a cross and a sword, and I have the symbols of Peter and Paul, which I can combine in different forms and then in different kinds of letters. Or I can make 2 kinds of swords and link them to the various directions. I can use them in the tarot cards like this. I can show this as a link between technique and morale, the sense of measure and choice of tempo and courage, the links on the lion, speed of action, physical and psychological vigor, and so on. Or I can take that, go back to the Tengri symbol. I can turn it upside down. This is the Algiz rune upside down. Or this is the elk, and this is kalk, or the chalice. Man and spirituality, ear and runes. This is the Y cross on which Christ was crucified. The upside down one is the inverted cross on which St. Peter was crucified. And the X cross is the cross on which St. Andrew was crucified. I now take Christ's cross and St. Peter's cross and St. Andrew's cross. I take the St. Andrew's cross and put it this way. I take this cross and put it that way. So this is now the English cross. I now change the colors and it's the Scottish cross. I put those together and then add the red for an Irish cross. And in 1801, I create the British flag. So the British flag is made of crosses. It's also made of X's and T's. And just by changing the context and by deciding which is the figure and which is the ground, I have either a flag, a symbol, letters, or the beginning of a nation. Thank you very much.